launching into it, kicking off our athlete interviews here ahead of the 2025 Western States 100. The king of New Zealand here, Dan Jones. Dan, good to see you, buddy.
What an absolute privilege to be the athlete to kick this off. I'm very excited. It's just great to be back in Olympic Valley, and we've got some beautiful days approaching. Broken Arrow this weekend, and then Western States in a week's time after this weekend.
Yeah, your third Western States, a fifth place and a fourth place. We'll talk a little bit about your history here in a second, but first let's talk about your season so far. I'm putting you in the Trail Runner of the Year conversation already here, halfway through the 2025 season. Ryan and myself got to see you absolutely rip the Tarawera 100K on home soil, getting the three-peat in February. You won the Lake Sonoma Marathon. You won the UTA 50K. So undefeated stretch here going into Western States. What do you think has contributed to this hot start to the year?
Well, long may it continue, first of all. I love that streak to continue, to be fair. And I don't know, I feel like this is almost, what is this? This is like my third year now of like really trying to crack on hard into the international scene of trail ultra. And so, I just feel like it's the experience that's coming together. I've had some really strong races this season, and also some where I've had to, battle a little bit harder to get the result done. And even just like thinking back onto the Tarawera performance, even UTA, I felt super strong as well. And it does give me confidence just like thinking back and be like, okay, if I can harness that kind of energy that I brought around those races, I've got like actually a pretty good community here in this like region now as well, which I think helps a lot. And if I can bring that forward into Western States next weekend, I'll be in good stead.
It's funny, when we were at Tarawera, Ryan and I were both just like, God, Dan Jones, you're just like visually super impressive as an athlete, and then putting together the execution is obviously where the rubber meets the road. And it feels like now in your third year, you really are starting to figure that out. One thing I remember us talking about in New Zealand after Tarawera was like, you were clearly super fit, right? You lowered the course record by a major margin. And one of the things we were talking about is like, are you in danger of being too fit too early? Understanding the Western States was sort of the major goal in the middle of the summer. How did you navigate through the spring months to ensure that you're peaking at the right time?
Oh, that's fair. Like, New Zealand summer is pretty nice to train in, so you want to make the most of it. And I did go into Tarawera pretty fit, but I think I definitely didn't try and probably carry that same fitness right across to now. Like, there were some like lulls in there. There was travel in there as well, which you have to also like navigate, make sure that you recover well from. And we had the Adidas Terrex training camp, so I went over to Europe, did that. Bounced around a couple of different places, went to Barcelona for a week. And to be fair, it probably knocked me around more than what I thought it did going to Lake Sonoma. Like I had a good race there, and I used it as a nice little tune-up race, let's say, on my way back to New Zealand. Because, I can either go back through Singapore to New Zealand, like two massive flights.
There's no short trip.
There's no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts in training. There's no shortcuts in life. No. And then, so I stopped by San Fran and raced Lake Sonoma, and then I went back to New Zealand. And from then, I actually went for a bit of a hunt, like went into the bush, did some cool stuff, like good time on the feet. Let's call it base training. And then I started out onto my Western States proper training block. And that kind of led me over to UTA, which was, near the start of my build. But from there, I've just recovered really well first off, and then just launched into a really good block. So here we are.
So I want to talk about your final build towards Western States. But before we do, let's go back to last year. You finished fourth, running a stupid fast time. I remember talking to you on the infield on Sunday after the race, and you were proud of the performance, but sort of like, man, it would have been nice to be on that podium. You were fourth also at CCC. So I don't know, I think it opens up an interesting conversation about like, what does it take to break through to onto the podium or potentially winning here at Western States? I'm sure it's something you put a lot of thought into. Does it come down towards, is it like the training and the buildup, or is it more about strategy, mindset, execution?
I think it's execution, because I think we all go in with a strategy and we all go in with a pretty hard, like determined mindset. So in the end, it's like how it all pans out on race day. Because even like I've heard like some people say, oh yeah, you know, Dan Jones, yeah, fourth place in the fourth place. Like, does he have what it takes to actually like put himself into the front of the field and go out to win the thing? And I'm like, you know, to me, it's just bullshit. Because like, I don't know, do you recall like last year how the race panned out?
Of course I do.
Yeah. But like a lot of people probably don't.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
I put myself into a position, I was like second or third into Robinson Flat with Hayden Hawks. Jim was out in front.
Yep.
But we actually caught him. We caught Jim by last chance, I think it is. And then we dropped all down into that, is it Devil's Thumb Canyon
To
type
Swinging
place.
Bridge.
Yeah, to Swinging Bridge
Yeah.
together. And we're all there kind of together. And then Jim took off on that uphill up to Devil's Thumb. And so I was right there. And yeah, I don't know, maybe I did try and push too hard to try and get that win earlier on. But at least I put myself in the mix. And like, yeah, I just need to, I've got, the fitness, and I know what I'm capable of, with performances like Tarawera. And like, if I can find a day like that, I know it's 100K rather than 100 miles, but if I can find it in 100 miles, I'm sure I can be pretty well placed.
It's so funny you bring this up, because I was at the Western States Memorial Day training camp, and I was with Rod Farvard at Swinging Bridge on the long day. So for our viewers and listeners, it's the day where you run from Robinson Flat to Forest Hill on Memorial Day training camp. And when I was with Rod at Swinging Bridge, which for our viewers and listeners is roughly mile 45 or so on the Western States course, we're at that spring, where the fresh water comes out. And he was like, the top 5 of us were all together at this little spring last year. You, Rod, Hayden, Jim, and maybe John Albin was the quad or the fivesome there.
And Dakota was Dakota.
Maybe that was the year before. Anyway, I would love for you to share a bit about that moment. Like, honestly, when Rod brought that up, I was like, man, I would really love to hear more about that moment, because it is a critical moment on the course before, what you could consider to be the crux climb up to Devil's Thumb, and effectively the symbolic halfway point of the race. And the 5 of you guys were together. Could you just like bring us into that moment, what the feeling was like in the pack, and then, like even share what it was like to see Jim sort of run away at that point. Just love to have you paint the picture for us.
Yeah, so you mean down at Swinging Bridge there, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So I didn't actually realize how close Rod might have been, but all I had in my mind was, okay, I'm in the top 3 position. I'm in a podium position at Western States right now. And so, yes, okay, Jim took off on that uphill up to Devil's Thumb. And I was like, okay, sweet. I feel like I'm in control here. And Hayden went with Jim, and I was like, okay, because I just recall from my debut at Western States, that climb absolutely kicked my ass. So I was like, okay, you can walk sections, and let's just like stay within yourself. So you've got energy going up from El Dorado into Michigan Bluff, because I just vividly recall that was brutal the previous year. So okay, I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm feeling fine. And as I was making my way up, I saw Hayden coming actually back to me. And I passed Hayden just before Devil's Thumb, and I was like, oh, sweet. And I just made my way from Devil's Thumb down into El Dorado. And that's a long downhill.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, you got to maintain, you got to work, but you got to like make sure that you don't blow your quads to bits. And actually that's where Rod caught up to me. And I'm like, dang, maybe I was like mucking around going down there. Mucking around, like taking it not taking it too easy, but just not pushing hard enough.
Yeah.
And so it was crazy going up. I feel like El Dorado was that, because Jim was out of sight, out of mind for me. But I was like, oh no, it's happening again. Like these bloody canyons, they just get ya.
Yeah. I just think psychologically, like, you have to be so strong in those moments when you have a pack of 5 guys, all world-class athletes, and all the people who you're expecting to be in and around at that point of the race. And it's like, okay, this is actually happening now. We're halfway through. We're all together. Like, who's the best? And obviously the chips fell in the way that they did, but it was one of the best Western States ever. You ran 14:32 and one of the fastest times ever, and a very, very solid 4th place finish. So talking about your camp now, your training camp. You've been in Cedar City, camped out with Hayden Hawks, who unfortunately is not going to be on the start line this year. I was looking at your Strava, man. It seems like this final push was really solid. I'm sure, there's things that you could poke holes in, but as a fan and as an observer, it feels like it went about as good as it could have. So maybe you could share a little bit of the details with the audience, both in terms of the intentions of the training, the execution, how it sets you up for the race.
Yeah, it's always hard because you just want to do as much as what you can do, but also like you're kind of feathering the line between, going too hard as well. And little things pop up here and there, but luckily I've been fairly robust and like have gotten it together. So basically the thought process was behind it. Like I was doing like passive heat strategies in New Zealand, like using the sauna a lot because it was going into winter.
Yep.
And so then I went over to Australia, did that, and then bounced straight from UTA, from Australia, right through to the Western States training camp. And because I raced UTA 50, I really tried to just like, I was a bit like on the down the way. We barely even saw each other that much, but I was just getting out for some good long runs, getting some time on the course, but not being too much of an introvert, just saying hi to everyone, but not really running with heaps of people. I was just doing my own thing.
Yeah.
And that felt good. And I felt like I got some decent heat work. It wasn't like super hot. So like going up to Cedar City, it was just great to catch up to Hayden and just have like that training environment that I was used to from the previous year as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just, although I wasn't able to train with Hayden or train with anyone for that matter, it was nice to have him there and just been like, like him believing in me, like him seeing what I'm doing, like, bro, you've got this, like you're training really well. I was up at altitude. I felt like I wanted that for a few weeks to just get used to this Olympic Valley altitude. And yeah, honestly, like it couldn't have gone much better. I just stuck to the plan, like getting in some good mileage, some good vert, got the altitude, and it was hot as well. So I went down to St. George only once, but it was about like 35 Celsius, 100. Oh, it was about 100 Fahrenheit. Mm-hmm. So not super crazy hot, but it was just enough to
hot enough.
Yeah, hot enough. And like what more can you want when you're like, in that situation? It's like you just see so much shit that you can compare yourself to. Oh, am I not running fast enough? Am I not getting into all these puffer jackets? And so maybe I should be, but it is what it is. I jumped in a jacket once or twice. I feel like I've done like as much as I could or even more than previous years. So
good.
Oh, whatever. I'll just go and race.
Yeah, it's funny. I recall Rob Krar famously used the phrase, it's not about heat training, it's about heat management. Like he famously never got in the sauna, never put the layers on or whatever, two-time champion himself. But of course you've run faster than him. So the game has changed and it really is probably about both at this point. But like having looked at your Strava, you were putting in some freaking big boy workouts. I mean, like 3 by 25 minutes tempo. Like what was the emphasis of the training, and was it similar or different from years past?
Oh, it's hard to actually recall, to be fair. I know what I've done, but like I would say, the Tarawera block was more like a speed base, more threshold type work.
Yeah. Get
some good speed into the legs early season. And then, maybe this block is more geared towards actually doing some longer workouts, but just hitting like tempo effort. When you're throwing in hills in there, it's also a nice way that you can actually just judge by effort rather than like looking at the pace all the time. And so really it is long and it does wear you down eventually, especially running like hills at altitude. If you push too hard, you're soon going to find out about it. But it was like a nice in between, right? Like running Western States, okay, yes, there's some fast sections. But am I going to be running 3:30 pace? Hopefully not. Well, hopefully, but probably not. So it's just like making sure that you're feeling comfortable at a reasonably fast pace.
Yeah.
And like what I was doing in training is going to be way faster than what I'll be doing on race day. Wow. It's just it's actually more so like thinking, okay, I've got a long run. Let's actually just like build blocks. Day after day, and you probably saw that there's actually nothing over 5 hours in my training. So the long runs were kind of long, and I've gotten some good like long races in, or like 50k races, but there's nothing actually out the gate like crazy.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because, there's people at Memorial Day training camp who did like 50-mile runs the first day of training camp and then back it up with, 20 back-to-back 20s after that. So anyway, awesome stuff and very interesting for our audience. So the last 2 years, 5th place, 4th place, ran 15:22, and then 14:32. So 50 minutes faster, though only one place better. I'd love for you to, compare and contrast those two performances and especially kind of focus on where there's room for improvement for you here this year. As you think about last year in particular, is there a moment in the race where you felt like, oh, I let it get away from me here? Like, where can you do better in 2025?
Yeah, I've obviously thought about it a lot. I'm just trying to think about how to word it. And it's, to be honest, there's nothing that I have to drastically change. I think that's an important thing. It's just like the small things that you can think about changing when you're in that kind of environment where you've put together a pretty well run race. And I thought about that afterwards last year as well. But I know that my performance can be better. And let's look at it as a whole, that like almost like if I can actually just like run the same effort getting to Forest Hill, I know I can go faster in that final 60 the way that I run. Yeah. And that's why like sometimes you kick yourself because it's like, that's why I say the execution, because you just have to execute and be like, okay, I know I can run faster, but it's just got to happen for you on the day.
I'm laughing because, I've had similar thoughts in my career. Just like, it's so much easier said than done to get to Forest Hill with legs remaining. And of course, I'm sure throughout the next 10 days, we'll reference Joe Yuhan's Western States Killing Machine article on iRunFar.com a million times for our viewers and listeners. You must go read it for a deep and thorough analysis as to why that is the case. Those last 60 Ks, as you described, Dan, it's a runner's course, but if you don't have legs there, it will absolutely make you suffer. So anyway, what we were talking about before we got started here was that, you mentioned you've been really pushing in this sport for about 3 years now. And, first time you're here at Western States, it was like, okay, Dan Jones, somebody to look out for. He's in the mix. Last year, building on that momentum. And I think this year, probably for the first time, people are looking at you as a contender. I wonder how that changes your psychology going into the race of like maybe being a little bit more under the microscope with a little bit more expectation behind you, and how it impacts the mindset going into the race.
It is interesting though, because I am a contender, but there are also other big dogs that are contenders. And so like I still feel like, even though I feel like I am, like, I'll be up there. Yeah, maybe I'm not like the most talked about name. That would be actually very fair to say. And it doesn't actually bother me in that sense. Like obviously I want to be thought of as like a top contender. Sorry, what was the question? Or was just like
rambling? I think coming into the race, being viewed as one of the contenders to win the race, does it impact the way that you ultimately approach the race? Because I could see it adding unwanted pressure in one way, but I could also see it being like that fuel that helps you break through, from 4th place to onto the podium or potentially win.
Well, that's where I was kind of going with that last rant. It was just like, it is what it is. I'm going to run my own race. Yeah. And like, you've got to like think about what moves are being made as well. And like, you don't want someone to get too far ahead, but you've also got to really manage, because, I mean, we've just talked about that last answer is like, you want to get to Forest Hill with legs so you can actually finish strong, because I personally think that I can make up the most time from Forest Hill to the finish line. There's so much time to be made up. And it's crazy because I was talking about it with some teammates, and at the Western States training camp, it just felt like I was just jogging along. And then you look back at Strava segments and it's like, oh, you were like 2 or 3 minutes faster on that segment than what you did on race day. And it's just like you're just jogging.
Yeah.
And of course, okay, maybe it's not just jogging, but it's like, just an aerobic effort. And then I think back to last year and I was like, oh, that was so like hard. And like, it felt super hard at the time, but is it actually that fast or is it actually that hard? So I think that's like, it's quite good mentally to think about these things, because it's like, those are work-ons that you can like bring back on race day, being like, okay, like, yes, it hurts right now. Yes, it hurts really bad getting up to Michigan Bluff. But you've just got to get there. You're going to see your crew and they're going to like hype you up and get you to Forest Hill. And Forest Hill, you can go faster.
Yeah. Okay. So winding down, I'd love to ask you, as you meditate on this stuff, do you have a sense of how things might play out? Do you have like not only goals for yourself, but do you have kind of a vision as to what the dynamic is going to be like, as it compares to previous years or course record paces or things like that, and where you want to be relative to both, historical times and also the runners in the field?
Yeah, I'll go left field, and like, the attrition rates have been lower in the past couple of years. I think this year it's going to like go out hard, like record pace, and I think we'll probably see some blow ups.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this year there's just some people that are going to want to prove points and just like go out for it, and like that's fair. Like, yeah, it's going to be interesting though, because I'm not one to like try and let a race like escape me either though. So I reckon like, I've been pretty good in the past at pacing myself, but you just never know with this race. It could just like all come back to bite you if you just start too hard, and like it may happen, because in my previous two experiences, it just seems like things are just going real cruisy up to Robinson Flat at least. And I feel like this year it might just be different. It might be a go from the gun.
I think it probably will be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, because of talking heads like myself who've been putting the 2019 Jim Walmsley course record out there in the conversation forever. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are marking that on their spreadsheets, but people forget who Jim Walmsley is. Unfortunately, he's not going to be here, and that year he did have favorable conditions. So if it does go out hot, it is going to be a survival game, and also who can be the smartest. Maybe winding things down, we were just talking about your teammate Caitlin Fielder, who's here, a fellow Kiwi. She's here for the first time, making her 100-mile debut. Have you shared any words of wisdom with her to support her in her 100-mile debut at Western States?
Yeah, I've tried to. She's pretty like kick back, like real relaxed as well. I mean, I'm sure we've all got nerves as we approach race day, but I think we'll have some more discussions and things. She's actually down and getting some like last minute recce over the course, some of the course she hasn't done yet, and so it's just like kind of trying to like impart some of the I guess the experiences that I've had, and then they may not necessarily be her experiences, but it's quite good to know, right? The canyons and stuff, like how much they hurt after doing like 50 or 60K already, all that kind of carry on. It's like, I'm sure she will make her own decisions and like race well. She's an absolute weapon, but in the end, like we just like try and hype each other up and just say what we need to say and get it done.
Absolute weapon. So Ruth Croft has been a champion here. Now we got Dan Jones and Caitlin Fielder hoping to become maybe the second and third Kiwis to bring home.
Wouldn't that be something?
A Cougar trophy. Dan, good luck, buddy. We're big fans of yours at Freetrail. We wish you nothing but the best. Cheers. I hope you have a great race.
Thank you very much for having me as the first interviewee. It's been an absolute pleasure.